Welcome back to another episode of Travel Chicks podcast, where we talk travel, transformation, and inspiration. And I got to say, today's guest, I somehow found her in searching on the internet. And the trailers, I got to say, I have not watched your film yet, but I anticipate on doing so. But when I started reading about her story, I was so compelled that I just wanted to learn more. I want to see where everything came from and what inspired her. And of course, it has everything to do with travel, transformation, and inspiration. And so today's guest, Dianne, she's best known for being a filmmaker, a photographer, most importantly, an author, and she's been spending a lot of her time writing these days. And so, Dianne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Melissa. It's really great to be here.
So how about we just dive straight in?
Sure.
Tell us all about you. I mean, we see that picture in the background, 500 Days in the Wild. So why don't we start there?
Okay, well, that's definitely a good place to start because that's what's happening right now. So 500 Days, as Melissa said, I'm a documentary filmmaker, I'm an author, a photographer, but my career for the last 20 years has been as a documentary filmmaker, and I always write books about my expeditions afterwards. And they tend to mostly be adventure films because I was inspired by The Hobbit when I was 10 years old. You know, it's a journey. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's some kind of transformation that's going to happen to you on this journey. So 500 Days in the Wild is my attempt. I'd already made a film on Mount Everest, and I'd made a film up near the North Pole. So I heard about the longest trail in the world being created here in Canada that was going to connect over now 600 different trails into one long trail, the longest trail. And this trail is made up of both land trails and water trails, and it had never been done. So I decided after Everest and the Arctic, well, this is it. This is the third film in this triptych. I'm now got to go do this film on the longest trail. So I set out with the idea that I could do this trail in 500 days, which was a complete fantasy world. But sometimes our dreams need to be upheld by some crazy belief just to get us out in them. And then once you're out there, you just surrender to what you have, right? I think you're a mother, I know by being surrounded by women who have been single mothers, really, what they thought when the child was in the womb, and then, oh my God, my life just changed. It turns out I'm not going to be traveling India with my child after all, reality check, so I had one of those reality checks on day 10. So the trail, as I mentioned, it's now 30,000 kilometers, but when I did it, I wanted to do one continuous line. I paddled a canoe 8,000 kilometers, and I hiked, biked, and snowshoed 16,000 kilometers.
Wow.
The trail connects 3 oceans. So I started at Newfoundland. I go right across Canada, through all the provinces, paddle Lake Superior, get up into northern Alberta, and then start a 4,000 kilometer paddle up to the Arctic Ocean, and then turn around and come back down through northern Alberta, BC, back home. Finished the trail. My last was a paddle on the Salish Sea into Victoria. This journey actually took me 1,862 days, not 500 as I originally planned. And that's what I mean about surrendering. So by day 10, I'm on the journey and I'm out on the trail in Newfoundland, and I have my little type A, schedule. Okay, my goal today was to get here, and I'm going to do this much. And I pull up my schedule. And it's completely ridiculous. Like I haven't gone in 10 days, but more or less I thought I could do in 3. And I sort of have my first crisis of faith. I mean, leading up to the journey, all my friends are like, that is impossible. You can't do that. But I'm like, oh no, I can try, I'm going to try. And then I'm out there going, this is crazy. What am I doing here? Like 10 days. This is going to take a lot longer than 500 days. And total crisis of faith. But my mom has always raised me. Whenever things get overwhelming, she always says, Dianne, if you can, sleep on it tonight. Like, don't make the decision right now while it's feeling overwhelming. Sleep on it. And then in the morning, think about this again and see, So I said, I'm going to sleep on this and see what I feel like in the morning. And I woke up the next morning on day 11 and I had a full plan. My mom was right. Looked totally different in the morning. And what I went was, I just got to burn the schedule. I got to burn the schedule, like let go of these preconceived ideas I had sitting at my kitchen table, planning this journey, and surrender into the journey that I'm in now. And
I got to interrupt because that is like the life of a mother.
Right.
It's like you have all these plans. I just drove my daughter to summer camp and I had all these plans of what we could do in the car. And I attempted, and it was like, nope, I'm not going to get her out of sorts because we're driving a long trek. I don't need to entertain that. And so, yeah, it was
surrender. Surrender. Be responsive to what's really happening instead of imposing something on something all the time, right? So it was really the first big change in me. That morning, I burned the schedule, and as I was doing so, the information that came to me was, you know what? It isn't about the fastest way. And it is not about the easiest way. The journey is about finding the most meaningful way.
Wow.
And honestly, that's what made that journey and this film what it is today, was giving. And that's why I didn't change the title from 500 days, which I thought it was going to be when I left, to 1,862 days, because it's the first turning point. It's the first change. The first dramatic change in me is burning that schedule and realigning myself away from this kind of measurement of my experience to connection. I'm out here as a storyteller. I went out there as a filmmaker. I had just turned 50. I was not going out there as an extreme athlete trying to conquer anything except maybe myself, searching for more understanding within myself. But it was to make a film. And so, yeah, that was the very first kind of change in me that happened on the journey. Anyway, it took me 6 years. I filmed over 800 hours in Canada. The film has done really well. It came out about a year ago now in Canada and had a theatrical release, and now is streaming on Paramount Plus. It's very easy to see the film in Canada. Outside of Canada, I'm just getting my wings. Fingers crossed, it looks like there'll be a theatrical. I'm just signing the deal right now in Australia this fall, October. So if you have listeners out there, remember that title. We're coming. I'll be touring with the film to 10 different cities and doing event screenings, which means I attend and do Q&As. Anyway, all to say is that's where this project is right now. I always laugh. People are always like, what's next? It's like, wow, well, it's just like, I just created something. So what's next is I now need to take this thing to the world. And that takes a few years. And it's the part of the filmmaking world. People think the day your edit is done and the film is opened, it's like it's done. No, you're only halfway. Now you've created something you need to, if you want to share this something and I try to make my living from what I do, then yeah, it's very much sticking it out on the back end. And I will write a book about this adventure. As you mentioned, I am also an author. So my previous book on Mount Everest, I wrote a book called 40 Days on Everest. 40 days at base camp, Mount Everest, I think is what the title says. And then, the film's called 40 Days at Base Camp. That's just going back out. There's a TV 1 hour version of that's been circulating for quite a few years. But the feature length, the director's cut, which is the one that I made and won a lot of awards, that's just getting re-released right now. So, yeah, I mean, before that, my film in the Arctic is called This Land. You can see it on the National Film Board website in Canada for free. And that one also has a book called This Vanishing Land. So, I guess in a summary, that's kind of like my last 20 years of my life has been making these adventure films and writing these books. But there are a lot more. I guess, especially once you see 500 Days in the Wild, it's not a conventional adventure film. My bike is 40 years old. My backpack is 15 years old. Everything is from secondhand stores or gifted to me. So it's not about, it's not very slick. It's not all about those big corporate sponsors at all, because before I left, my dog had died and I'd been married to a woman and that relationship ended. My marriage, I got a divorce. The film it's really interesting. Actually, the film begins with the burning of my marriage.
That's what I saw on the trailer. And that's what I wanted to ask you today was, what was it that caused you go out on this adventure? Because I mean, the way that you captured the burning of that marriage certificate just kind of draws the viewer right in.
Yeah, well, we've all been disappointed in life, in ourselves, and in the things that unfold sometimes that aren't our fault. So definitely the end of my marriage and the death of my dog is really what precipitated the journey for me. I mean, as a filmmaker, I loved the idea, but how do you say, if you're in a partnership with someone, hey, I'm going to leave for a long time, don't know when I'll be back again. Like, that's not going to fly, So I found myself at the end of my marriage, and then when my dog died, I'm like, this is an extremely sad time for me. At the same time, there's opportunity here. It's a good time. I like to call it checking out to check in. Meaning by stepping away from my life for a while, going out on the trail, I knew I'd get in really good shape. And as much as, because the journey was so long, you can't be extreme about it in the extent that every day you must self-care. Like, it's not about how far you go. It's about making sure all the things that you need to do to take care of yourself happen, or you won't make the long journey. And I mean, that's true for all of us in our lives. As a mom, if you don't look after yourself, how you show up as a mother for your daughters is impacted, right? If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to be shorter with her. You're not going to have as much capacity. So our self-care, even on this journey, was imperative. You must look after yourself. So, that I knew that taking this check out to check in was about getting in really good shape, self-caring, really cleaning out, and then really connecting. I kind of laugh because so much of it was like, I just want to be alone for a while, and go make this film. And it was like, no, from day one, I needed help. And, from strangers everywhere, kindness of strangers everywhere for years and years. And, once I got out there, it was all about connection. It was about connection to self, connection to each other, but also connection to the web of life. I think one of the most amazing discoveries was I thought I'd be lonely out there, right? Of course, right? I'm going to be all alone. Like, a few times the friends joined me over the years, but most of it was done by myself. And I thought, oh my God, you're going to be so alone. And I never was alone. Never. I never felt loneliness. In fact, I felt more connected to myself than I ever have. And the thing is, humans are just 0.01% of all life on Earth. 0.1%. So when you're in nature, you start connecting to that other 99.9%, right? You start connecting to that web of life. And so that healed me immensely. That and the kindness of people, because it's hard not to watch the news and go, what the hell happened? Like, when did the psychopaths take control of, like, the governments of the world? Like, what's going on? And you think the world is just this bad place or something. And, in 6 years on this trail as a woman, very vulnerable, one could say you can't lock a tent, right? I never met one human that was a threat to me.
Wow.
Not one. Like, even when I didn't trust, like, there's a scene in the film when I get lost in a storm in Nova Scotia, and it's late at night, and the trees, it's the end of a hurricane. So it's very bad, very dangerous situation for me. I'm lost. And then the hunters come up to me in the dark, and, I should have been happy to see these hunters, but because I was afraid, everything I was looking at in the world was through this perception of fear. So I was afraid of them. And they turned out to be good men. I mean, like, it's every woman's nightmare. You're lost, you're in the woods, it's a storm, and here's these guys drinking rum with guns and ammo and, full camo. Or you're like, woo, woo. Like, what Mama warned me about. Like, what am I doing here? But they were fathers, they were brothers, they were husbands, they were good people. And they brought me back to their hunting cabin, made me deer meat, smoked a cigar, got a fire going, dried all my wet gear, pulled out a map, figured out where I got lost, and the next morning sent me on my way.
So I'm curious, in that, what made you just release that guard where you were viewing them from an eye, the lens or...
Necessity. I mean, it was, I was in a very bad situation. I either had to trust them or potentially have a fatal evening. I mean, when you're in a storm, branches are breaking, big strong winds are happening. They call them widowmakers. The ground was running water, so there was no place to set up a tent. So it was, boy, these are both not good situations right now. I'm going to have to trust these guys because at least I'll get out of the storm. But it was against my better judgment. I had a few things, like I carried a GPS sending out a message every 10 minutes. And they didn't know I had that. And that was my secret to myself. I thought, you know what? I'm going to trust these guys, but I have my backup security system here where people following me are going to see this dot land somewhere and stay somewhere. And so there's an accountability that they're not even aware of than I am, But as it turned out, they were good guys. But as a woman, you have to be cautious, and you need to, you got to operate in a way that makes you feel safe. So even though I knew I had to trust them, until that trust could be proven, I did have, other things happening. But I think the takeaway for me, though, when I left there the next day was just looking at myself and my own biases and my own prejudices, and how we live at a time, because we put shadow on the front page of the newspaper and we put shadow as the lead story in the media. We've come to a place of great distrust amongst each other. And yet all around the world, the majority of people are really good, kind people. Humanity, it's an and like I said, like, what are the odds? I'm not saying that every woman that goes out and spends 6 years on a trail is going to do so safely. I'm not advocating that, but I am saying in my personal experience, it's also me and my age. And so it's the way I hold my energy. It's the way I have very clear boundaries and healthy boundaries with people. It's the way I express myself and hold myself. I mean, maybe all of that also played into it, but having said all of that, I never met anybody that was a threat to me, and people were always kind. Do you need some water? Do you need a couch to sleep on? Do you need a shower? If I was near cities and if I was out in the bush, it was like, sit down, make some camp coffee, share stories of what's coming down the trail for me, where I might find some fresh water. What's amazing about nature is, when you're out in the woods, nobody says, are you conservative, NDP, or liberal? Like, no one cares about your politics, right? Yeah. What they care about, or what's interesting, is that we all find ourselves in the same place, which is out wherever we are. And so what's more interesting is what we share, not what makes us different. In those moments, right? And so again, that's a big takeaway for me, is especially now things are getting more and more polarized, and it's okay to have a difference of opinion. It's okay to be at the kitchen, at a table, having a conversation and going, oh, that's interesting. You feel this way. This is the way I feel. And not like lose your crap, basically just, if someone has a difference of opinion, just say, that's interesting. Pass the salt, carry on. Like, it's not about changing each other's opinion. It's about just acknowledging that there might be one, and then carrying on, whereas now people won't even sit at a table with each other, you know what I mean? Because of these polarized politics. So like, there's a lot of self-righteousness in all of us, maybe too much. So,
well, and I think you tackled or spoke to something that, I mean, let's face it, the COVID times.
Yeah.
Completely.
I was in the bush. I missed COVID. I came out of the bush and I'm like, what happened to you people? Everybody's traumatized. Everybody.
100%. It has annihilated human beings. And your comment about connection, I believe that is the very key that all of us are missing, is connection. I mean, they talk about addiction. Addiction is on, I can't even believe my eyes in Edmonton when I go downtown the city and seeing the state, and people just pass each other by. They say the opposite of addiction is connection. And
nicely said.
like the connection piece. I mean, I think it's so powerful just hearing your story of being out in the wilderness and your only option is to connect with the 99% of what exists on planet Earth. And I believe that, you know, for a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, especially women, we, you know, a lot of our clients are that middle age to, you know, 50, 60, 70 years old, and they went through the same thing as you. Divorce. They, you know, they've lost a loved one. They've experienced grief, and they don't want their dreams to die, but they also want that security and that safety of like, oh, Dianne did this. That's kind of inspiring. Maybe I can do it too. And it's like,
definitely.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Thank you, Melissa. And you're right, by the way, what's happening in Edmonton, you know, as I'm traveling a lot, I was only home 13 weeks last year. I was traveling a lot with this film around the world, and I've been to a lot of cities all over the place. And this is everywhere. The chronic homelessness, the mixed with mental health issues and addiction is this concoction, this problem is in every city of various sizing, like not just the biggest cities in a province or state or in the world, but in smaller communities as well. And part of it is the inflation that came through COVID. So the cost of living, the cost of rents. In the 1980s, that's how old I am, I had a job in high school making $13 an hour. On weekends, working at a hospital part-time. And my friends working at Safeway, you know, grocery store back then were in the $15 to $20 an hour range. And, you know, at that time, a house in Vancouver, let's say that was $100,000, is that same house today is about $3-4 million.
Yeah.
But wages have not changed. In fact, they've gone down. What the minimum wage at Walmart when you start is $15 an hour. So 40 years later, they're only getting paid $2 more an hour than I was.
Yeah.
But that cost of that home has gone up from 100,000 to 3 million. So, you know, I'm not an accountant, but you do the math. So what's happening is, as a result of inflation, is the death of the middle class. You have this extreme gap right now between, you know, doctors and lawyers can barely afford a house in Vancouver, you know. So, you know, this is problematic. Also in the 1990s, when I just became a journalist in Canada, you know, they closed the schizophrenic hospital for schizophrenia. And not just in BC, but actually it turns out they closed them all over North America for sure. I can't speak for the rest of the world. I don't know why they all collectively decided at the same time, let's just close all these institutions. And then the plan was back then that they would have these houses. So instead of being in a big institution, 4 people per house with like somebody helping manage, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that never happened. So you released all these people with, you know, and again, like, it's possible to be highly functional and schizophrenic, but the problem is when you don't get the care that you need and the support that you need, you have what's going on today. I've spoken to a lot of people afflicted with schizophrenia living on the streets right now, and they all have the exact same story, which is when that happened back in the 90s, at first it was great because it's like, you know, right on, like we can be more fully functional participants of society. But the government didn't live up to the back end of that deal. So what happened was they'd get out, they were on their medication, they would get a job. Let's say one guy, he was working in a kitchen as an assistant to a cook. And then, you know, he didn't like his drugs because they really numbed his emotions and he was feeling good. So he would just choose to not take his drugs for a while and let himself feel something. And then he'd have an episode and someone would call, like in his apartment where he might be screaming. And so the manager of the apartment would call the police, who would then invoke the Mental Health Act. And then this guy would end up in a hospital, lose all his rights. By the time he got out, the landlord like kicked all his stuff out onto the street. And, you know, he lost his job. And so after a while, you stop trying. It's like, okay, well, what's the point of getting another apartment and another job if I'm just going to lose it? So I'll just live out here and I'll scream in the bush where no one will phone the cops. If, like, you know, we have a problem on our hands. Mix that with drug addiction and you've got a serious issue going on. And I mean, it's not just people with mental health issues that are homeless either. We have, a lot of people that are homeless living in cars right now, for lots of different reasons. But it all centers around high inflation, high cost of living, and wages that just have not kept up. And so this is a crisis well beyond any one city. It's everywhere that I'm traveling. Everywhere I see it.
Yeah. And I mean, for someone who has really literally traveled all across the country, I mean, I can imagine you've seen a lot. And so in the, I guess, kind of eagle eye view, looking down on your experience of this 500 days in the wild, what have you learned? I mean, we've heard that, you rip up your schedule, because it doesn't matter if you're in corporate downtown, some city. I mean, the idea of surrender, connection, like, this bird's eye view.
It's not being so rigidly attached to your plan. It's okay to have a plan, because that's like finding a path through a forest, right? That's my plan. But then you need to adapt the plan to what's unfolding, right? So, I used to laugh when people were like, okay, well, I'd like to come out and film you for a couple of days. And so can we set some dates? I'm like, yeah, no, can't set any date. How do I know I don't know how far I can travel every day, because there's so many variables I can't control. I'm not going to see how people get hurt in nature is, oh, okay, we got 2 weeks holiday. Let's go kayak 500 miles, and it's like, well, you can go try to kayak 500 miles, but if the weather turns, you might have to wait on shore for a few days. But people that give themselves these time limits go, no, we got to go no matter what, because we got to make this deadline. And then they get into a very dangerous situation that can prove to be fatal. When I paddled, on Lake Superior, I did, and I paddled over 8,000 kilometers in a canoe over those years. If there was big waves, I just stayed in my tent. I'm like, okay, the weather's not safe for me right now. So I'll write in my journal. I'll do some filming. I'll make extra food. I'll sew a button. I'll fix this piece of gear. And I'll just take a couple of days of rest, right? Like I can't, you're not going to beat it. You've got to just work with it, right? Work with nature, not try to she's just going to slap you silly if you think, I'll share a story with you. It's kind of indirectly connected to what we're talking about. So I'm on Lake Superior and I'm paddling, and I spent a lot of time in Indigenous communities in Canada. So before I left even, I'm a settler descent. My mom's Acadian and my father's from Newfoundland. And I love Canada. I love this country so much because I'm a woman and I'm a gay woman and I feel safe here. And I don't take that for granted. There's always room for improvement, but I think we live in an amazing country. Our medical system, I have great gratitude for. Now we're getting dental care. So much love for this place. But I also know that, they built this trail to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday. And people have been living here for thousands of years. So for me as a storyteller, I wasn't interested in telling a story about the last 150 years. I wanted to acknowledge everyone. And so I wanted the journey to honor the ancestors of this land. So I went up to Haida Gwaii, which is an island in northern BC of the Haida people, Indigenous people of Canada. And I met an elder up there named Vern Williams, who was with a woman named Dianne Chamberlain. And I told them about my journey that I was going on. And I asked them for guidance. I said, how can I honor the ancestors of this land as I'm traveling across it? And Vern gifted me an eagle feather, his eagle feather, which he used in ceremony. And, I was very touched and moved. And in fact, I immediately had a great deal of reverence for this feather because I knew a total stranger had just given me the thing that matters the most to him in his life. Wow. Okay. So, but I was also like, how am I going to look after this fragile feather, right? But because I held the feather with love and reverence in my heart, what I didn't realize was that feather was actually going to shape my whole journey. So as I traveled across Canada, Indigenous elders would come out and meet. I was met by the Grand Chief of the Mi'kmaq people when I was paddling in Nova Scotia. I met a Mi'kmaq woman, Maliseet woman that I paddled with in New Brunswick. And this goes on across Canada. I spent time with 20 Indigenous communities. One of them was on Lake Superior, which the Anishinaabe people, the indigenous people of that area, call Kichigami. Anyway, I was paddling and I was in a very sacred area of the lake called Agua Park. There's old pictographs there. There's a beautiful scene in the film with these pictographs. But and then I end up getting invited to participate in a ceremony with Anishinaabe elders for a week. So, you know, I go into the first morning. Every morning we go into the teepee at 4:30 in the morning as the sun rises and as the birds begin to chirp, and the door of the teepee always faces east as the sun rises, and we're in ceremony and we're singing and drumming, and then we take turns passing the feather around, right? So the feather, I can't share what other people said, that's private, but I can share that when I got the feather, what I was thinking was, oh, I hope I don't sound like an idiot. Like I really want to say something. Like I got too self-conscious. Mm-hmm. You know, it was too much in my mind, not in my heart. And so I was like, oh, okay, I know what I'll ask. You know, I figured it out in my brain. I'm going to ask for strength because, you know, I got to go back out there and keep on this journey. You know, I need strength, right? So feather. Right, I get the feather and I'm like, okay, I'm asking for strength, you know. I pass the feather on and the elder next to me goes, woman from the east. And I'm like, that's me because I left from Newfoundland. And he goes, do not ask for strength. If you ask for strength, Creator is going to send you 100-mile-an-hour winds and 20-foot waves. Ask for understanding.
Wow.
And that's it right there. Be careful what you wish for. And so there were many teachings and many learnings like that on the journey. But I would really, you know, say that as much as my equipment saved me, like, you know, making sure I looked after my gear and then, you know, having the right equipment, it's very important. I would say the wisdom of listening and learning in these communities as a settler with reconciliation in my heart. And reconciliation, you know, it's a big friggin' word. We use it a lot in this country. But here's what it is. Reconciliation means kinship. It means friendship. It means hold each other's babies, share some food, and get to know each other. That's it. That's what reconciliation is. And behind all my films, there's this concept called the two-eyed ways of seeing. I believe that the way to move through the future is to take technology and science and indigenous ecological knowledge, traditional knowledge, and bring them together into the two-eyed way of seeing. So for a more holistic and more balanced view of the ecology that we're moving in through. All of my films in some way have that at their core value. You don't get up Mount Everest without the Sherpa people, who are the indigenous people of Tibet who moved into Nepal 1,000 years ago. They have a sacred relationship with the land and the mountain. You know, up in the high Arctic, I was embedded in a military patrol with the Canadian Army to raise a flag on the most northern tip of land in Canada to tell Russia to back up. And I travel. Even the Canadian Army knows they don't go into the high Arctic without. I was with 7 men. 5 of them were Inuit traditional knowledge experts. Well, 4 of them. 4 of them were traditional knowledge experts, and 2 Army guys and 1 Ranger guy. And so, you know, they know. And sure enough, you know, we get up near the North Pole and we get hit by this wicked storm and like -80 and a freaking whiteout. And guess what happens? All that high technology stops working because batteries freeze in the cold. And it's the traditional knowledge of the people of the land that keep the story going. And same with 500 Days in the Wild. What kept me alive? I'm not an extreme athlete. I traveled for 6 years on a trail. No, I'm the first person to ever do this trail. There wasn't like little signs telling me where to go. And I feel that the reason why I was safe out there was because I listened and I learned, you know, and a lot of it had to do with this up here, right? And it was, you know, the difference between, I think we don't have one indigenous homogenous kind of view in this country. We have dozens and dozens of different indigenous communities that each have their own dance, their own language, and their own culture. But there are some similarities. And one of the core similarity for me is the difference between the two worlds, Indigenous and settler world, is one word: with instead of on. And Indigenous communities live with the earth. You travel with the water. You are mostly water. You are on water. So I'm praying to the water. I'm like, the water is sacred. The water is sacred. When I'm on the land, the earth is sacred. The earth is sacred. I was taught to do that by a Mi'kmaq elder who said, the old way, Dianne, is not traveling without a motor. The old way is what you carry in your heart as you travel. Travel with respect and reverence for the earth. So in the water, you see me in the movie, I'm constantly putting my hand, thank you, you know, the water is sacred. The water is sacred. And that is how you manage fear. When, you know, fear is healthy, panic will kill you. So a lot of these kinds of journeys, and even a lot of life, is learning how to manage these emotions when they unfold, right? So for me, some people pray, some people sing a song. I did all of those things, but I also honored the teaching of the Mi'kmaq elder, Ben Sillyboy, by like making that sacred connection to the earth and to the water when I traveled in it, especially when I was afraid. So if I got afraid in the forest, I'd be like, the earth is sacred, the earth is sacred, the earth is sacred. My resonance, my energy, when I get into that mantra, is letting all the animals and the trees and everything around me know what, like, that's my vibration. That's your resonance. They're not going to attack that. They're going to attack fear, because if you're afraid, then they get afraid. They feel your fear.
Well, and come on, let's look at the world that we live in right now. Right? It is fear at the most elevated level possible. And what are we all being called to right now in the world? We are being called to have faith over fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Powerful. So powerful. So, Dianne, I am so happy to have had the honor to connect with you and hear about your journey of why and what you learned. And so I guess the big important question is, how can people connect with you? How can they connect to view the film? And yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, like as I said, in Canada, you know, it's easy. You just type in 500 Days in the Wild, but it's on Paramount Plus. It's streaming on Paramount Plus, but they've third-partied it. You can see it on Apple, Amazon, whatever, in Canada. Okay. Outside of Canada, it's a little bit more challenging, but I'm working on it. Like I said, I'm looking at, hopefully we sort of seal the deal this week, but it looks like I said, well, the film will be released in Australia this fall. And I've been working on the UK a lot. I just came back from a big film festival in the United Kingdom in London that went very well, called Raindance. Sold out our screenings there. Got some really good media in the Telegraph. So slowly building up, you know, some momentum to get this film out to the world. You know, if you're in the United States and listening to this podcast, if you go to your local cinema and request to see this film, you're actually doing an incredible act of kindness, because believe it or not, theaters really listen. Theater managers and theater programmers are really interested in what people in their community want to watch. So if you think you and your friends would like to see this film and you let them know that, that's usually enough for them to contact me and program the film in the cinema. And that's how I've been kind of working my way through the States. I've done about, I don't know, probably a dozen cinemas in the US market, but I haven't made a big sale in the US. We did Oscar qualify the film in LA last year, but I still, it's, you know, it's a tough, the only thing harder than doing the trail and making a film while you're doing the trail is selling the film to the world when you're done. But I got my big girl pants on, and I take it a day at a time, and I just try to, you know, keep a perspective on things, right? You said earlier, like be like the eagle, and it's so true. When we get overwhelmed in life and we start spinning, we're like the mouse, right? All you can see is what's in front of your face. But taking a breather, stepping out, going away for the weekend, and you get that bigger picture, right? And you just try to hang on to that bigger picture. Every morning, the bigger picture for me is I wake up and I say thank you to my ancestors and all my relations, just for my health, honestly. You know, as you get older and your friends start to get sick and you watch your family, you know, age, you realize that health is wealth. that is the greatest gift to all of us. And you know, it's not to ever take those small blessings for granted. As far as staying in touch with me goes, I have a website, 500 Days in the Wild. And I also have a website in my own name called diannewhan.com. I'm on Instagram. Probably that's the social media that I use the most is Instagram. I like it. There's an Instagram account both for myself and my company, 500 Days in the Wild and Dianne Whan Photos. There's a Facebook page for 500 Days. I'm, you know, every few months, and I'm due to do it right now, I do update the website with what's coming. So soon I'll have all the information about Australia on the website as well. And, you know, you can easily email me directly through any of those sites as well. So I'm pretty easy to find out there. And yeah,